afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. You have Alyssa Corum and Justin Nielsen here to break down the market action post Fed announcements. So we saw some volatility in the middle of this session, Justin, but even though we closed down, we did finish off of the lows for the day. We'll get into that and also take a look at some areas of the market of interest from today's session.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and start with financials since that's what was on a lot of people's mind today. And we'll just take a look at the sector, Spider Sector Funds, XLF, that ETF. We'll also take a look at Vista Outdoor as it was the stock of the day today. And we'll revisit one that you and Ken talked about last week, Avantor, which offered up a follow-up opportunity for a buy.
That it did. But first, a look at the major indexes. Let's check in on the S&P 500 with the SPY ETF coming down to the 21-day line, coinciding with around that 420 level, which is the 4,200 level for the S&P 500, which closed down about 0.5% for the day. The Dow, the hardest hit, down about 0.8%. The NASDAQ down 0.25% in small caps, finishing the day down 0.1%. So what do you make of the action that we saw today, Justin, with a little bit more volatility, headline-driven volatility there midday?
Absolutely. And, you know, there was a little bit of a dry up in volatility. I think that there was a little bit of a wait and see. You know, that happens a lot of times. You know, it's a 2-day Fed meeting, and a lot of people wait until that Fed announcement comes out. And even then, you can still see some volatility because after the announcement, there's often Powell speaking for a while, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. So, you know, you can have some jostling back and forth. But yeah, if you look at the, you know, the spider, you know, SPY, take a guess where the Fed announcement, you know, was. You know, you can kind of see, you know, at 2 p.m. Eastern time, how there was a big downdraft. But I think, as you pointed out, what's important is that a lot of those losses were paired by the end. And so you take a look and, you know, it got support at the 21-day moving average line. There's, you know, nothing really broken here, you know, at all. I mean, it's still very close to previous highs. There's, you know, support of the 21-day moving average line. You know, it's not an issue. But the one thing that is something we keep on seeing is this rotation. So that's something to keep an eye on and worth looking at. If we flip over to the NASDAQ composite, you know, one of the issues here is that the NASDAQ composite, and again, you can, you know, be looking at the Qs of the NASDAQ, but the NASDAQ, you know, it got above 14,000 just recently, and the query, it did that in April, and in both cases, it wasn't able to hold it for very long. So one thing I do like about the NASDAQ composite and its look here, even though it's getting turned away from those highs, the way it closed today, well in the upper part of its trading range for the day, didn't even come down to the 21-day moving average line, and it stayed above that 14,000 level. So I think that's making things a little bit hopeful there. And you know, tech, and you know what, let's go ahead and just finish it up with the IWM, the Russell 2000. That one also paired quite a bit of the losses, closing up in the upper part of the range. So I think, you know, given that there was a little bit of a shock to some people with the Fed, you know, saying that they're going to raise rates probably twice in 2023, you know, I think the markets ended up handling themselves well, and it's not about where you start. Action in that regard.
Right. It's not about where you start, but where you end. I think your internet might be cutting out, but you never know when you're remote whose internet it is that's cutting out here a little bit. But also, should investors be concerned about what we're seeing with the Dow? It's only 30 stocks, but what about what we're seeing with the Dow now below the 50-day?
Well, this again speaks to that rotation that we've been seeing. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average has been one of those that has been the most resilient, making new highs when the NASDAQ was out of favor. But you know what? That rotation happens, and this one might be a little bit out of favor right now, while the NASDAQ is kind of flexing its muscles. So you just have to be, you know, if you're going to be kind of going where the money is, that's going to require a lot of nimbleness. If you're kind of going with a long-term look, you need to start looking at more of that secular growth, and maybe a little bit away from the industrials that we were seeing as where all the action was before.
Okay, well, as you mentioned, Justin, financials in the spotlight today. So taking a look at the Spider Financial ETF XLF, pulling back to its 50-day line and finding some support there. So talk to us about trading this group, this theme with an ETF like XLF, which
what we saw here,
yeah.
What we saw here is, this had such a phenomenal move, from October through June here, and
a fabulous move, October through June.
Moving average line. Right. So, this pullback that we saw to the 50-day moving average line is just, to me, a potential new opportunity to either add to a position that you maybe have in financials, or to even start a new position. So this pullback was mild, and it got support exactly where you'd like to see it at the 50-day moving average line. Now, if you want to juice up your performance a little bit, you could go with one of the leveraged ETFs. FAS was one that we put on Swing Trader today.
Yeah, and let's take a look at the daily, finishing up about 0.25% for the day. And the intraday chart, very wild for this one, but you could see some huge upside volume coming into the stock. We had set an alert on IBD Live, a trend line. Chris was saying if it takes off the highs of the day, that could be a compelling place to get into something like this.
Yeah, and so again, that's one of the benefits of IBD Live. We're going through a lot of these setups, and even if it doesn't hit during our show, we are sometimes setting alerts for you live so that you can kind of be there when the action is. It was a little bit, I think, tough to buy this one before the Fed meeting. You kind of had to wait, but once that Fed meeting happened, 2 o'clock Eastern time hit, FAS, really plowed through it in a very strong way.
It did. And VSTO, worth checking back in on in the leisure products group. A nice upside reversal after coming down to the 21-day, Justin.
Yeah, and I'm going to strongly suggest that people check out the Stock of the Day article that was written by Jillian Rich. It's always a good way to kind of get some insight. One of the things that kind of interested me, hey, look, the Olympics are coming. They're going to be providing ammo for the Olympics that were postponed. And what also kind of interested me
for the shooting competition.
For the shooting competition, yes. So, one of the things that also interested me there is, we talked so much about how Adobe turned their service into a subscription model. They're turning ammo into a subscription model. So there's a lot of things that they did. And if you look at this strong move that it had on May 27th, level, and could be ready for another move. So bounced right off that 21-day moving average line, and volume has really trickled off low, since it really came in strong after that investor day, and there were a lot of upgrades that accompanied it. But it's looking good. I'd like to see a little bit more volume come in on the bounce, but you had plenty of volume on that investor day and upgrades as they were happening.
Okay, and last but not least, checking back in, as you said, Justin, on AVTR, Avantor, a medical sector name that saw a big move on 610, putting it on our radar, and now vying for a breakout over this cut base.
Yeah, so if you had bought it earlier, again, we did put this on your radar last week. Ken was the one that brought it up. This could be an opportunity for a follow-up buy. Maybe adding to your position, because that's a way that you can start off a little bit smaller, still a good chunk, maybe half or 60% of your full position, and then follow it up as the stock is working. That allows the market to pull you in more. But you know what? Leaderboard actually started a position on this one today. And when the market is down, across the board, it's often a good idea to take a look at those stocks that are holding up very strong. And you really see that with the relative strength line. Here we are, we've got what we call the blue dot special, the relative strength line at new highs, while this was basing and coming out of this base right here.
And checks off a lot of boxes from a fundamental and technical perspective, which is why it was able to land a spot on IBD's leaderboard. Justin, thanks so much for breaking all of that down. And thank you all for tuning in. We're going to continue the conversation tomorrow morning on IBD Live. Justin and I have a podcast to go record, and hopefully our internet connections will smooth out a little bit. But we really appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow morning on IBD Live, investors.com/IBD Live. Thanks for watching.